of Atlantia, the FTSE MIP listing closed down by 0.2%, 21 euros per share.
How much? Excuse me.
0.20 in the red.
Okay. Well, as you see, putting 20 in the red, it is nothing. Actually, it's very little. 0.2. Yeah. Okay. 0.2. 20 points. 0.2 net. So it's nothing.
Yes.
The question that I pose to myself and then I revert to the public is why something probably is going on, and generally speaking, with those news, market stocks react very badly.
Yeah, there is a
very
more
severely, more substantially,
yeah,
in a severe manner.
Yeah.
Now, shift immediately to US. 1 second. Just give me no more than 15 seconds, and then we go to North America. There we are. Update. Oh, here the situation here is very, very interesting.
Actually, I just wanted to point out for our viewers right now, while you're finding the charts, that actually markets are recouping losses. S&P 500 so far 0.05 in the green, Dow on the other side 0.14 in the red, and Nasdaq Composite 0.1% in the green territory. So a little bit of positive vibes getting back to the market. So did you get the chart?
Yes, I got everything. I was checking the market in this moment. If you want, I can tell, but we don't have time. I can tell the price action of today. That was very interesting.
Here it is. I have the chart.
Let's get back to
the US that you sent to us. I wanted to point out for our viewers that at the very end of 2019, we look at this table together. And healthcare was not at the very first place. I mean, already we're seeing some changes over there. We have very little time. So can you explain very briefly to us what is going on there?
Again, situation, okay, everything is flying, it's flying, and there's little to say on that. So nonetheless, from what I said before the last time, information technology has boosted very strongly and positively the market. So we do have it in the first place in the rank. Second, communication services. Here we are. Why I said that it's a reversal point. It's a reversal engineering. And utilities is in. Sorry, I'm checking another thing.
Utilities is.
Utilities is information. Sorry, healthcare is the first. Information technology is the second, and energy is picking up on the 13-week price per certain change. If we have to take a look on all the other elements, we can pull some strings, which are in this moment. You can buy every single dip. I do not expect a severe correction. We've been seeing that since the end of the year and the beginning of the year. I don't expect in this moment a sensible correction. By sensible, I mean more than 2.5%, 3%. Sensible into the bracket, entre guillemets, as I would say in French. If you are a trend follower and you have or you have in portfolio those sectors, then go for it, and especially take a look to energy, which actually recouped very much.
It did.
It did recoup very much in those 13 weeks.
You know what is very interesting, the energy sector? I was wondering, in your opinion, many investors divested their money from the energy sector in 2019. Do you think that was a mistake?
I don't think so.
Honestly so you're speaking, not bullish in 2020
no,
on the energy sector?
I'm not bullish again in 2020. If we have, how many time we have?
A few minutes, 1 minute.
Okay.
So you're
no, I'm not bullish.
rather bearish.
I'm
on
rather
the
bearish. I'm rather bearish for
sector.
it, always for a fundamental number of reasons. If you wanted to make a bet, buy Tullow. Okay. I would like to add something more in what is the close to the earning seasons. Yeah. The other part that I want to show, which is very, very interesting and very important, if you have time, if you give me 1 more minute.
Very quickly, we gotta go.
Very quickly, we gotta go. Wrap it up. The most interesting, you have to, because I have say it again. 1 sec. Earnings season. We have to find earnings season, and then we got. Here we are. If you my screen is illuminated. If you look at the first 2 columns, we are just at the very beginning. We have 19 corporation reported something today. Probably there is 21, 22 against 505. And if you can see the numbers, earnings and the earnings summary of the corporation that already reported, the 84% of the corporations, all sectors confondus, beat the expectation. Only 16 missed, all confondus. Industrial 50%, consumer discretionary 83%, as that confirms continuously my view. I'm not a genius, but I know what I'm talking about sometimes, not always, but sometimes. Consumer staples, as I said, can recoup. In US, it's very strong, 83%. And in info technology, 100%.
Well, that's normal.
Well, it's a wonderful position you're, and I love that very strong and bold position. I do consider that very, very, very appropriate and good, and it is. Could be, if we had some more time, it could be the price reaction. I steal 3 seconds. Price reaction once the data came out. In the positive, when the corporation has beaten those corporations, if you will, has beaten the expectation, the analyst expectations, the price reaction the 2 days after was on those stocks 5.7% is in average.
All right.
When they miss it was 17.4 minus.
All right, we got to wrap it up. Thank you very much, Fabrizio Riofili, financial analyst. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much to you, and have a very end of day to everybody.
Thank you. We're heading for a very short commercial break, but stick around because we have more stories for you in the next part of the show. Welcome back to Lefoni International. S&P 500 is 0.1% higher. Dow on the other side, 0.1% below the flat line, and Nasdaq Composite 0.06 in the green territory. The VIX index at the 12th level. And I want to switch very quickly also to the fixed income. The US 10-year Treasury is yielding 1.82, the 2-year 1.57, and the 3-month 1.53. I want to show you also very quickly the dollar index, which is slightly lower this evening compared to yesterday, 97.37, euro dollar 1.11, and the sterling against the dollar 1.30, 0.08% lower this evening. I want to start with one of the major stories today, and this is certainly the jobs reports. Actually, U.S. employers have added jobs for a record 10 years. December data showed pointing to steady economic growth heading into 2020. Something to notice really is the fact that the economy added 145,000 jobs versus 160,000 expectations. And of course, unemployment stayed at a 50-year low, steady at 3.5%. Very curious fact regarding these non-farm payrolls is the fact that actually women held more U.S. jobs than men in December for the first time in nearly a decade, a development that likely reflects the future of the American workforce. I just wanted to bring you some statistics here. The share of women on payrolls, excluding farm workers and the self-employed, exceeded the share of men in December for the first time since mid-2010. Labor Department data released Friday. Women held 50.04% of jobs last month, surpassing men on payrolls by 109. That's a milestone for the women. Despite this fact, I want to point out for our viewers that the jobs report was a little bit disappointing because, as I said at the very beginning, expectations were at 160,000 versus 145,000. So let me bring to the show my next guest this evening, Jan Ergas, Chief Economist, Tigris Financial Partners. Good evening, Jan, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Alex. It was a great pleasure. It was a great honor. Thank you.
Jan, I want to start with what do you think about this jobs report? Do you think it's something to be concerned about, or just a little bit of lower data?
I think with the slower data, I would not be overly concerned. I mean, I believe that at some point the U.S. economy will slow. At some point the pace of hiring will slow. At some point the qualified workforce, which some employers are looking for, will become scarcer. These are all things that are playing into this. I think the important thing to remember is this. First, the U.S. economy is still producing jobs. This is very positive. Secondly, that in fact, even though wages, in fact, have not risen by as much as people expected, and in fact have had a very slow increase this month, I mean, it is still, the salaries are still rising. So we've still got people coming into the workforce. They are getting the salary. There will be the effect of the brute force of numbers, more people, more salaries, plus consumption. What this report is basically telling us is that this consumption will not be as strong as we thought in terms of increase, but it will still be there. I think this is the most important point. There's also another very important point, which is the U6, which is the real number you have to look at, which basically includes those who are not, so to speak, formally in the labor force, but in fact are discouraged, are not looking for jobs for whatever reason. This has come down as well. And I think this is the real number to look at because that is the slack in the labor force reflected there. So I think it's okay. I do not believe that the U.S. economy is going to steam ahead at 8% a year. I do not think it's going to do the 3% a year heralded by the Trump administration. I think we will bumble along here. And I think that at some point you're going to come up with another rock, which is the fact that a lot of the newcomers to the workforce are wholly dependent on earned income, such as wages, to consume, because they are from a socioeconomic strata which has limited access to credit. So we're going to be seeing this. We're going to be seeing a growing asymmetry between the fall in the unemployment rate and access to credit and plus consumption. So I think this needs to be looked at. I think, don't get your hopes up too high for a consumption boom in the U.S. I think the best we're going to do here is bumble along.
All right. So do you think this slight decline of the markets is not based on on the macro data?
I think it's based on a number of things. First of all, I think it's based on the fact that some people are disappointed by the jobs data. Okay? And they would have thought this would have heralded a booming economy and lots of hiring and so on and so forth, and this has not taken place. Secondly, I think people are starting to realize that Santa Claus rallies, Liquidity Plus, have basically run their course at this point. We said that it would come to basically the middle of the January, towards the end maybe, and people would start reassessing their positions. This is happening. 3, there are lingering concerns, and not even lingering. I don't see why the press keeps talking about lingering. There are very lively concerns as to global security. Let us just look at what happened with this unfortunate plane which was shot down, which tells us, in fact, that this situation is far from resolved. We've also seen the U.S., of course, input sanctions, further sanctions on Iran. So, I mean, it is not a picture which per se on its own is absolutely brilliant. What we really got going here is still a U.S. economy that's moving and globally central banks that are still accommodative. And I think that, in fact, if the market has not sold off more, it is basically because people say inflation is low or inflation potential is low because of low wage increases, and therefore cheap money will stay in place for a long time. So this is basically what's going on. And I think there are some people who are taking money off the table at this point. They made a lot of money last year, and are going to start taking some profits maybe.
All right, that's a reasonable explanation. I want to bring you a breaking news, actually, something that we discovered in a very few minutes ago. Actually, the U.S. military recently targeted but failed to kill Iran's senior military commander in Yemen around the time it conducted the drone strike that killed an Iranian commander in Baghdad. According to U.S. officials, the highly classified operation against Abdul Reza Shahlai in Yemen shows that the U.S. operation that killed Major General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad last week was more ambitious and multifaceted that the Trump administration has disclosed. Details about the operation against Mr. Shahlai have been closely held. While his death has been reported by some social media accounts, U.S. officials said he is still alive. The officials didn't say if the U.S. tried to kill him in a drone attack or in a ground operation. I mean, that's a very important story, and certainly is going to bring more tensions between the United States and China, because U.S. already killed Qasem Soleimani, the major general, the second most important person in Iran, and at the same time they were targeting, but this time in Yemen and not Iraq, another major general, as we could see. I hope I pronounced correctly the name, Abdul Reza Shahlai, and the U.S. confirmed that they did not manage to kill him. This is breaking news. As we saw, actually, U.S. today, Mike Pompeo and Secretary General Steven Mnuchin slapped once again another sanctions on Iran that are gonna put the economy in even in more difficulty, no doubt about it. Jean, what do you think about all of these stories? Do you think the United States is exaggerating from political point of view and foreign affairs?
No, I don't think they are. I think that, in fact, we're seeing something else now, which is that a growing number of countries are becoming more and more willing to openly express support, maybe regardless of support for what the United States did. We have seen the UK government take a very clear position. We are seeing Merkel, for example, being equidistant. Now we're
Jean,
looking,
can you speak louder, because we don't hear you? Can you speak?
The EU, yes, we're seeing the EU meet. They have finally managed to meet. Let's put it this way, they have not taken great decisions, but at least they're meeting. So I think that, in fact, there's a general, gradual, tacit consensus is building that something needed to be done. Now, what is the U.S. going to do next? Well, they said they were going to put sanctions, and they put sanctions. I think the important thing about those sanctions is that those sanctions are not just on U.S. companies, but they are secondary sanctions which extend to foreign entities which do business with the entities sanctioned by the U.S., among which there are Chinese companies who are said to be facilitating trade with those entities. The question then becomes, will this be an issue with regard to the upcoming U.S.-China trade agreement, step one? So I think the U.S. is playing hardball, as they say in baseball, but at this point is playing hardball on two fronts. The military, but is also pushing on the sanctions front. I think the Iranian government, I think, is in a tough spot right now. I think they really are in a tough spot. No, I believe that, in fact, there is a growing consensus worldwide that something needed to be done. We are hearing much less protesting at this point. And I think that the story of the plane, should it be proved to be right, or should this be proven, and we know that Mr. Trudeau in Canada has come out and said they have multiple intelligence sources. I've seen the newsreel, I've seen the film. Should this be proven, then this will be very, very serious, and I think that we're going to start seeing a big shift towards the U.S. position.
On the other side, I wanted to point out that actually the Iraqi Prime Minister said that the United States, with the last actions, they described them like an unacceptable breach of Iraqi sovereignty and a violation of the two countries' security agreements. That's a pretty serious accusation, and if it was another country but not the United States, most likely they would have been important consequences, at least legal consequences. So how justified is this decision from the United States? It's really very, very questionable, but I want to switch to the commodities and to see very quickly the market's reaction of this last story, the breaking news that I just showed you. US WTI is trading $59 per barrel and the Brent $65 per barrel. Jan, are these the price ranges that we're going to see in 2020, considering the Middle East tensions that are actually deepening?
I think the Middle East tensions, first of all, says something very true, Alex. I do not buy the line that things are just okay because the end of the world did not happen this week. You notice I've been fairly coherent and consistent on this, and now, in fact, we are seeing further evidence come out. I think we're going to be seeing some volatility. The volatility is going to be driven by expectations rather than fact. There have been no shortages at this point. Oil is abundant. U.S. shale is exporting. And I do not believe that any member of the OPEC Plus group, let's put it this way, except for has any, don't play anyways, has any interest in limiting sales. So yes, I think we're going to be seeing those probably slightly below 59, and the spike will come not from the economics, but it will come from the politics, which remain largely unpredictable. But there are substantial stockpiles and strategic oil reserves, which, for example, the U.S. and other countries can activate. So I think, fasten your seatbelt. This could be bumpy, but I do not see oil at $200 or $100 a barrel strictly on economics. Absolutely not. It's got to be a very, very big political jolt.
It's been a milestone year, 2019, for the United States in terms of oil production. Do you think it's going to be the same in 2020?
I think we're starting to see some slowing on the shale front, but I think it's still going to be extremely strong. People say, shale production is falling, but it's falling from where? When I think of where it was 15 years ago, and look at it today, and we are a country which is practically energy self-sufficient, even we're exporting crude, then I have to sort of stand back from that. I think it's going to be a very good year. I think it's going to be a good year. I think we're still going to have sufficient crude to export. The crude which we export is very high quality, light oil, which competes very well with other crudes throughout the world. So I think it's going to be a reasonable year. Will the prices always be holding at this 59 in the absence of batch transmission of crisis data points? This I do not know. But I think it's going to be a reasonable year. And I think we're going to see some underpinning on the oil price.
Well, certainly that's very interesting. Jan, on the other side, I wanted to ask you your opinion. Do you think the gold is a better hedge at this point?
Yes, I think, look, quite frankly this. I mean, gold is the hedge for the ultimate scenario, which is war, and traditionally always has been, okay? I mean, my father was, as an anecdote, my father was with the British services during the war, and they were conducting missions in occupied Greece, and they gave them their 45 automatic, whatever it is, and they also gave them gold coins. My father said something very true one day. He said, the automatic could jam, but the gold coins always worked. So, in difficult situations, people are using gold. Gold is the ultimate refuge. Gold is not based on its value or its specific value at one specific point. It costs so much, but on the fact that it is exchangeable and acceptable. And I think it is very important. And a lot of gold buying is coming out traditionally out of the Middle East, and I bet it's coming out of the Middle East even now, quite frankly, by people who are scared, and most probably also by Iranians who are seeing the facts on the ground, who have accounts abroad, and are stockpiling gold. I'm convinced that this is going on, and this is what's keeping it up, and why we have this asymmetry between a gold price, which is, people are surprised, why is it so high, and a stock market which is very high. Because there are two different sets of buyers. One is looking at central banks, and the other one is looking literally at the risk next door and the risk of literally a blow-up.
All right, thank you very much. Jan Ergas, Chief Economist, Tigers Financial Partners. Thank you for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure, always an honor. Thank you. Alex. Have a great weekend.
Well, let's get back to the US indices. I just want to have a very quick look over there. So far, S&P 500 is 0.05 above the flat line. Dow on the other side, 0.14 in the red. And Nasdaq Composite struggling, but still above the flat line by 0.1%. The VIX index at the 12, as we could hear from our different guests, certainly the VIX index is going to be concerned in the upcoming trading sessions, that's for sure, especially for option traders. But on the other side, we've also heard from our first guest this evening that the VIX index is a good hedge despite the low levels. I wanted to show you very quickly the defense sector that we have been following in the last few days. As we can see this evening, they're trading slightly higher. For instance, Lockheed Martin Corp is 0.04% in the green. On the other side, Northrop Grumman is almost 0.5% in the green, and L3 Harris Technology is down by 0.7%. And I wanted to point out that tensions between US and Iran are actually ramping up because US just slapped new wave, fresh tariffs on Iran. So certainly this is going to be a huge factor in their relations. On the other side, I just wanted to remind everyone, this is a breaking news. The US military recently targeted but failed to kill Iran's senior military commander in Yemen around the time it conducted a drone strike that killed an Iranian commander in Baghdad. So the United States proved that they had a very ambitious and huge military operation in the Middle East against Iran. Like the last story, I want to talk about a royal family because there have been very interesting developments over there in the last 24, probably already 48 hours after the announcement of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Actually, the United Kingdom should hold a referendum on the future of its royal family. A lawmaker vying for the leadership of the opposition Labour Party said earlier today Cleve Lewis, a candidate standing to replace Jeremy Corbyn at the helm of the country's main opponents to Boris Johnson's Conservatives made the suggestion at his campaign launch in London, discussing Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's unprecedented decision to step back from their roles as senior royals. Lewis said the couple were perhaps setting out a model for how the monarchy could be in the future. A lot of people would like to see the monarchy scaled down. There's been lots of discussions about the fact that the monarchy is quite large and there are a lot of people being paid by the public purse. Why not have a referendum in this country on the future of the royal family? We are a democracy. I would rather see us as citizens than subjects in the 21st century, according to Lewis. The royal family's reputation has taken a blow in recent months amid the exposure of Prince Andrew's friendship with convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, following an interview with the BBC's Newsnight in November, which was widely regarded as a PR disaster. The Duke of York withdrew from public duties, and of course now Meghan and Harry announced that they want to back from theirs as a senior royals. So a little bit of difficult times for the royal family and the monarchy. Let's see if you're going to continue to have a monarchy in the United Kingdom, the most powerful monarchy worldwide. A little bit of challenges over there for them, but let's see what is going to happen. As you very well know, guys, the Conservatives have always been supporting the monarchy. Well, that was the last story for this Friday evening. Thank you so much for being with us today and the whole week, and see you on Monday, exactly 6:45 p.m. on Le Fonte TV.
embassies, plural, not just the embassy in Baghdad, which is striking because lawmakers who were in those classified briefings say they heard nothing of the sort at the time. Let me sit down so you can see the officials are not here.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I'd just like to make a brief comment before we talk about Iran sanctions. I'm sorry everybody saw that the Dow hit 29,000. The President's economic plans are clearly working. We're looking forward to the China signing USMCA and a very strong economy this year. As previously announced by the President, we are announcing additional sanctions against the Iranian regime as a result of the attack on U.S. and allied troops. First, the President is issuing an executive order authorizing the imposition of additional sanctions against any individual owning, operating, trading with, or assisting sectors of the Iranian economy, including construction, manufacturing, textiles, and mining. And let me be clear, these will be both primary and secondary sanctions. The EO also allows us to designate other sectors in the future as Secretary Pompeo and me think is appropriate. Second, we are announcing 17 specific sanctions against Iran's largest steel and iron manufacturers, 3 Seychelles-based entities, and a vessel involved in the transfer of products. As a result of these actions, we will cut off billions of dollars of support to the Iranian regime, and we will continue our enforcement of other entities. Third, we are taking action against 8 senior Iranian officials who advanced the regime's destabilizing activity and were involved in Tuesday's ballistic missile strike. Secretary Pompeo will comment more on this. Today's sanctions are part of our commitment to stop the Iranian regime's global terrorist activities. The President has been very clear. We will continue to apply economic sanctions until Iran stops its terrorist activities and commit that it will never have nuclear weapons. I'll now turn it over to Secretary Pompeo.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. Today, President Trump is delivering on the pledge that he made. The day after Iran attacked American forces in Iraq, there will be a series of new sanctions. Secretary Mnuchin just mentioned 8 senior Iranian officials that are responsible for the regime's violence both at home and abroad. We're striking at the heart of the Islamic Republic's inner security apparatus. These sanctions targets include the Secretary of the Supreme National Council and the commander of the Basij forces. That's the regime's brute squad, which has in the last few months killed approximately 1,500 Iranians who were simply demanding freedom. Our action also targets other senior leaders close to the Ayatollah. They've carried out his terrorist plots and destabilizing campaigns across the Middle East and around the world. They've employed soldiers across the region's battlefields. They've trained militias in Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere in the arts of domestic repression. Today they're accountable for murder and mayhem. The goal of our campaign is to deny the regime the resources to conduct its destructive foreign policy. We want Iran to simply behave like a normal nation. We believe the sanctions that we impose today further that strategic objective. Our campaign is composed of diplomatic, economic components that have deprived the regime of billions in revenue that the regime has used to fuel death and destruction across the Middle East and all across the world. Sadly, the previous administration had opened up revenue streams for Iran. But under our administration, oil revenues are down by 80%, and Iran cannot access roughly 90% of its foreign currency reserves. And not even 2 weeks ago, President Rouhani of Iran admitted that our sanctions have cost Iran over $200 billion in lost foreign income and investment. As long as Iran's outlaws' ways continue, we will continue to impose sanctions. Finally, I want to reiterate President Trump's concern for Americans and dual national citizens detained inside of Iran. Iran knows these individuals have committed no crime. They know the charges against them are fake, and we will do all that we can to get each of them returned home safely to their families. With that, we'll take just a few questions. Yes, ma'am.
Secretary, the administration said this strike was done based on an imminent threat, but this morning you said we didn't know precisely when and we didn't know precisely where. That's not the definition of imminent. The president has also suggested that there was some sort of attack being planned against an embassy, perhaps several embassies. Can you clarify, did you have specific information about an imminent threat, and did it have anything to do with our embassies?
We had specific information on an imminent threat, and those threat stream included attacks on U.S. embassies. Period. Full stop.
So you were mistaken when you said you didn't know precisely when and you didn't know precisely
Nope,
where.
completely true. Those are completely consistent thoughts. I don't know exactly which minute. We don't know exactly which day it would have been executed, but it was very clear. Qasem Soleimani himself was plotting a broad, large-scale attack against American interests, and those attacks were imminent.
Against an embassy.
Against American facilities, including American embassies, military bases, American facilities throughout the region.
Mr. Secretary, follow up on that.
Yes, sir, John.
Mr. Secretary, in the initial hours after the missile attacks on Al-Assad and Erbil, it was believed that Iran may have taken steps to avoid U.S. casualties. But then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, came out, the Secretary of Defense came out, other officials came out to say, no, these missiles were intended to kill Americans. If it was Iran's intent to kill Americans, does that not deserve some sort of response? I mean, if somebody takes a shot at you and they don't hit you simply because you duck, does that mean that they weren't trying to kill you?
So I'll defer to the Department of Defense on the details, but there's no doubt in my judgment, as I observed the Iranian activity in the region that night, they had the full intention of killing U.S. forces, whether that was our military folks or diplomatic folks who were in the region, and I'm confident that the response the President taken is appropriate. President has said we don't want war. We want Iran to behave like a normal nation. The reason that the Secretary of Treasury and I are here this morning is to continue this campaign, our strategic effort to get Iran to behave in a way that doesn't continue their 40-year-long effort to terrorize the world.
Mr. Secretary, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, Secretary Pompeo, do you believe that the Iranians shot down the Ukrainian International Airways plane? And if the Iranians shot that plane down, will there be consequences?
We do believe that it's likely that that plane was shot down by an Iranian missile. We're going to let the investigation play out before we make a final determination. It's important that we get to the bottom of it. I've been on the phone. I was on the phone with President Zelensky. Just before I came here, I was on the phone with my Canadian counterpart. They were working to get their resources on the ground to conduct that thorough investigation. We'll learn more about what happened to that aircraft. And when we get the results of that investigation, I am confident we and the world will take appropriate actions in response.
And let me just...
Will you allow the NTSB to work with the Iranians?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. The Treasury will issue waivers for anybody, whether it's Americans or others, that can help facilitate the investigation.
Secretary,
last time that you both joined us in this room, it was back in September. You were announcing additional sanctions, including on the Quds Force. And Secretary Mnuchin, at that point, you said, I think we've done more sanctions on Iran than anybody, and it's absolutely working. Since then, we've seen an escalation in violence from Iran, shooting down the drone, attacking the embassy, a contractor who was killed, U.S. troops that were wounded. How are sanctions keeping the United States, economic sanctions, keeping the United States and United States interest more secure?
I think we have 100% confidence, and we are consistent in our view that the economic sanctions are working, that if we didn't have these sanctions in place, literally Iran would have tens of billions of dollars. They would be using that for terrorist activities throughout the region and to enable them to do more bad things. And there's no question, by cutting off the economics to the regime, we are having an impact. And as the President has said, the fact that the Obama administration turned over $150 billion to the regime, we think we wouldn't be in this situation had that not been the case.
May I just add, it's important to keep in mind what's taking place in Iran today. This country's never been in the place that it is today. Big, challenging problems. Their budget, they're going to fail by tens of billions of dollars achieving their revenue for this year. They've got real challenges in figuring out how to make difficult decisions. Do you underwrite Hezbollah? Do you pick Hamas? Do you underwrite the Shia militias in Iraq? Or do you allow your people to to have the opportunity to live the life they want and grow your economy. Those are the difficult choices that the regime is facing. And you can see the protests that we expect will continue, that will demand from the Iranian regime that they begin to treat the Iranian people in the way that they so richly deserve. And this administration will continue to support those efforts as well.
In the back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You mentioned secondary sanctions here. What is your message to our European allies who continue to do business with the Iranians? And then specifically, if you can, will this impact the INSTEX barter mechanism that was set up by a number of European countries to avoid U.S. sanctions and continue to do business without using the U.S. dollar?
Sure, thank you. I think those are both very important questions. So let me first comment on INSTEX. I don't believe there's been any INSTEX transactions. As we've made clear, we are working on a Swiss channel that we have approved for humanitarian transactions. We'll continue to allow humanitarian transactions. We've warned INSTEX and others that they will most likely be subject to secondary sanctions depending on how they use that. So that's absolutely the case. As it relates to the Europeans, both the Secretary and I have spoken to our counterparts in Europe several times over the last few days. We've emphasized the impact and the issue of Iran has announced that they are no longer part of the JCPOA, and we've had very direct conversations with our counterparts about that.
Secretary Pompeo, what is your definition of imminent?
This was going to happen, and American lives were at risk, and we would have been culpably negligent, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said. We would have been culpably negligent had we not recommended to the president that he take this action in Qasem Soleimani. He made the right call, and America is safer as a result of that.
Secretary Pompeo, why have there been these shifting definitions?
Go ahead. We're going to try to do one question for everybody, just so that as many people can get questions. So I don't mean to cut you off, but we're trying to, go ahead.
I mean, I only differ from my colleague, but sir, 6 months ago, Secretary Pompeo, the president said that U.S. intelligence agencies had been running amok. He spent most of the past 3 years he's been in office denigrating and attacking the intelligence community and disputing findings, whether it's on Russia or North Korea, or really any area that contradicts things that he has said publicly. Why then should Americans suddenly believe your assertions that you had good intelligence on this when the head of the executive branch has been casting aspersions on the intelligence community for most of his time in office?
Look, I served as the CI director for the first year and a half of this administration. I watched the president rely on the work that the intelligence community did for the entire time I served as the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. I watched him rely on the capable men and women who are delivering exquisite information to the executive branch. I watched the president have confidence in that information. We all challenge their work. We have to make sure we get it right. The intelligence community is not flawless. We get it wrong. In this case, the intelligence community got it fundamentally right. Even the reflections we've seen after the after the strike that Qasem Soleimani took has demonstrated that we were quite right. There was an imminent attack, there was active plotting, and we took an action that we thought was likely to create less risk for the American people, and I'm confident that we did that.
Go ahead in the back. In the back, thank you.
Thank you. This question is for Secretary Pompeo. There are reports that the Iraqi Prime Minister has asked you to start negotiating the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq immediately. Is that the case? Can you comment on that?
He didn't quite characterize the conversation correctly, but to the larger, more important point, we are happy to continue the conversation with the Iraqis about what the right structure is. Our mission set there is very clear. We've been there to perform a training mission to help the Iraqi security forces be successful and to continue the campaign against ISIS, to continue the counter-Daesh campaign. We're going to continue that mission, but as times change and we get to a place where we can deliver upon what I believe and the President believes is our right structure with fewer resources dedicated to that mission, we will do so. We also have today a NATO team that's here at the State Department working to develop a plan which will get burden sharing right in the region as well so that we can continue the important missions to protect and defend and keep the American people safe while reducing our cost, our resources, and our burden and the risk to our soldiers and sailors who are in the region.
Secretary Pompeo, if I can, here today at the podium, you said that the imminent threat was a threat to U.S. embassies. You didn't know precisely when or where. Last night, the president said it was a threat to embassies, including to our Baghdad embassy. Why can you say that here, and the president could say it at a rally in Toledo, but no one said it to lawmakers behind closed doors in a classified setting, as multiple senators have since said?
We did.
You said so. The senators are lying
We
when they say that
we told them about the imminent
was a
threat. All of the intelligence that we've briefed, that you've heard today, I assure you, in an unclassified setting, we provide in the classified setting as well.
To be clear, you told them that embassies were to be targeted. That was the imminent threat.
I'm not going to talk about the details of what we shared in the classified setting, but make no mistake about it. Those leaders, those members of Congress who want to go access this same intelligence can see that very same intelligence that will reflect what I described to you and what the president said last night as well.
Is that threat now gone with Soleimani gone?
Threats are never gone. Right? It's always a lot of danger in the world. Always a lot of danger in the world throughout the region. Nobody believed that a single mission in any respect took down the risk of terror. Terror from Al-Qaeda, terror from ISIS, terror from Al-Shabaab. No one believes that. The president doesn't. Look at the list, though. Look at the achievements in the administration. We took away the caliphate in its entirety. We took down Hamza bin Laden. We took down al-Baghdadi. We took down Qasem Soleimani. This is a list that has reduced the capacity for terrorists around the world to perform the functions that put American men and women and the homeland at risk. We're very proud of what we accomplished. We're going to stay the course.
Why don't we take one more over there? Yes, thank you.
I'm curious.
No, next to you. Right there, yes.
About the China trade deal. So the Chinese side is going to be here next Wednesday to sign the phase one part of that deal, but China is also a big importer of Iranian oil and Iranian minerals, and that's a big part of their economy as well. So how do you balance the two, and are you concerned about the Iran issue coming up in either the signing of the phase one deal or the negotiation for the phase two deal?
Well, let me just comment. I had no idea you'd ask that question, but that's a good last question to end on. So let me first say that we are looking forward to the Chinese delegation coming next week. Phase one is very significant. It includes very significant components of changes to technology issues, intellectual property issues, and $50 billion of purchases for our farmers. I would comment, I don't agree with your comment that China is a big buyer of oil. The China state companies are not buying oil from Iran, and I would just say we are having conversations with China as well with any other counterparty on sanctions evasion. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Why not for the Secret Service spending for the president's